the final 2 weeks of the legislative session, so things are a little crazy. So Ed, thankfully, has said he's going to steer the ship for us tonight, but I'm going to be on for any questions because one of the items I am working on up here in Albany is 421A. So it's extra ironic for me tonight's meeting.
We may throw it to you sooner than you think, but we certainly are going to talk a little bit about it. I know that it's not that it's since died. We can talk about its revival, I guess. But I was we'll wait till. Can we want to wait till a couple more people get on, or
Yeah.
Okay. For those who are on, just so you know, we were going to talk about 421A with a guest who was here before back in November of 21. A colleague of mine, an attorney, Yolanda Nicholson. She and her colleague Matt Berman were here talking about housing issues on the front line. One of the big issues, 421A, rent stabilized apartments in 421A developments. But another big housing issue of hers doesn't affect us as much, but is a big issue out there, is this fraudulent deed conveyance that's going on. And I know that there's a big bill, something going on right now up in Albany about that. And Yolanda does a lot of work in that area as well. As some of you will remember, she is a community protection, consumer protection attorney, and spent a lot of her time in banking and worked for Ed Towns and that kind of thing. Anyway, she had gone through a court battle with her developer on 421A. She was a rent stabilized tenant. I guess since we're live streaming, and anyway, she was going to come in and tell us about that in the court case that she had had a favorable decision on. I will stand in for her and put the decision up in the chat for everyone to look at and talk about the implications for our community and I guess what that means going forward. I guess if we're not getting many more folks, what do you think, Rebecca? Do we want to start? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll get started then. Welcome everybody to the June 1st Housing Committee meeting for Manhattan Community Board 8. My name is Ed Hartzog. I'm co-chair of the committee with my co-chair Rebecca Lamort, who is up in Albany reporting live outside. Hi, Rebecca. So folks, welcome our regular members. Rita Popper, always at the top of the list. It wouldn't be a housing committee meeting without Rita, Amy Schwartz, and others. Kevin, do you want to give everybody the rundown on?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us, you will notice that you are currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs. You can participate by going to reactions icon in your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or the thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is for technical support only, to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see your chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participants section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate that. So as I was saying before the meeting started, we were going to have a guest this evening to talk about 421A and the recent lawsuit, or not so recent, I guess it's about 2 years old, on 421A and rent-regulated apartments in those developments. Was a colleague of mine, Yolanda Nicholson. She's an attorney who had appeared before us back in November of 2021. along with her colleague, Matt Berman. Anyway, I had invited her to come to talk about her battle with 2 trees in Brooklyn and her favorable ruling after about 10 years of battling them, and what that meant for folks who had 421A buildings, which I told her we seem to be awash in 421A buildings here on the Upper East Side, and just to see what the implications are of that decision. And I won't be doing it any justice, unfortunately. I'll confess right now, but I'll do the best I can. I'm going to send it to Kevin to put in the chat for people to read. It's a lot of legalese, a lot of motions, renewing, re-arguing, but I'll get to the heart of the matter, which is about 3 pages into the decision. Ostensibly, the fact pattern is like this. There was a 421A building that went up in her neighborhood. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with 421A, that is a tax break that developers get in order to build affordable housing. That's the purpose of the program. They divided 80-20. 80% of the units are market rate, 20% are rent regulated. And for this and for building these units, the developer and the people in the building get a 20 or 25-year tax abatement on those units, and that is how we are able to build apartments and affordable units. So the argument goes down the line. As many of you who've been here over the years know, one of the big issues, of course, is associated with that is AMI. But we're going to set that aside for now. And the point is with this one, our colleague Yolan was one of the first tenants in this 421A development. I think she was the first one. So after the court had gotten to the end, cutting to the chase, spoiler alert, the second department, the appellate division, across the river in Brooklyn, decided that because she was the first one there, that base rent that she paid, that was the legal rent. So apparently, when you build these buildings, you register the rent with DHCR or HPD, whichever unit is. I guess DHCR because it's a state agency, and you say whatever the limit is. Typically, what happens is, say the rent is $3,000, the landlord, the developer, will register it at $8,000, saying that the rent is really $8,000, and then Rita Popper comes along. She's the first tenant, and because I'm such a nice guy as a developer, I say, Rita, I'm going to rent it to you for $4,000, and I tell everybody what a great person I am. I'm renting it for $4,000, and that may or may not be below the legal rent. But the point is that going forward, what I've done is I've registered that rent at a certain level, and going forward from there, we move up. And it's not obviously a legal scheme, and no one is following along with this. And what happened is, at some point, Yolan had been given a renewal, and it was, getting a bit up there, and she didn't renew, and she became a holdover tenant. She said, I'm not signing this because the rent is not correct. They went through all of these things, and the court basically said, because the developer was registering these apartments illegally, incorrectly, listing them either as with a preferential rent, as I gave Rita, or saying that they're exempt, or some other or some other designation. And you'll have to forgive me because I'm going to look away from all of you, and I'm going to look at this decision because I don't want to read it incorrectly. I'll read it. I'll read it from the decision here. It is now undisputed that although the landlord had applied for and received a 421 tax abatement, and pursuant to the terms of that program, the tenant's apartment is subject to rent stabilization. Since the tenant, Ms. Nicholson, was the first occupant of the premises in 2005, the initial rent was $29.33. That sum became the initial legal regulated rent, and all subsequent legal rents should have been calculated from that base rent. from 2005 to 2009, the landlord variously registered the apartment with DHCR as high rent vacancy, permanently exempt, or as rent stabilized with the legal maximum rent of $8,000, which is incorrect. The maximum legal rent was set by HPD, and the initial rent cap was $54.80, but the landlord had registered at $8,000 and had charged the tenant, Ms. Nicholson, a preferential rate. These registrations were false and therefore a nullity. And this is the key part here. So all of those things were a nullity, and the landlords failed to file a proper and timely and new annual rent registration statement results in the rent being frozen at the level of the legal regulated rent listed in the last preceding registration statement. So I think, and I wish Yolan was here, I basically cutting through all that. What that basically means is going years and years and years, because they registered incorrectly, you go back to where it was last legal. So it has an implication for the landlords if you can enforce it. And I wish she was here to kind of talk about the enforcement end of that, because I'd like to, see what we could do about if that's going on here. I can't imagine that only in Brooklyn that something along these lines is happening. And I know that we don't have 421A anymore, and I know that it's gone, but there has been a lot of talk about building affordable housing, and the mayor has a plan, and the governor had a plan. I know Rebecca's up there now covering it and seeing what they're going to, be able to churn out before the session is over. And I'm going to stop now because I think I've probably given only a portion of what really was relevant and not as good as our speaker could have, but I don't think I've given us misinformation. And I'm going to kick it over to Rebecca to see if there's anything going on in Albany that might, we might hear about in terms of 421A coming back in some form, one way or another.
So as Ed said, 421A has expired. It expired last year. It is no more right now. So the reason that it can still be used is because of projects that already applied for and received the 421A tax incentive when the program was in process and actively going on. They can still use that tax incentive for their projects as long as they commence those projects by December of this year. So there are a lot of developers now and contractors spinning their wheels trying to expedite construction and a lot of approval processes to keep their 421A tax incentive, because up here in Albany, there's not an appetite to do an extension of the old 421A tax incentive or implement a new one. And a big reason for that is because the rhetoric around 421A and affordable housing. I represent a construction union. It's my day job. I'm up here right now fighting for unionized construction workers. So for my piece of 421A, we fight for a wage requirement. This tax incentive has a really strong prevailing wage requirement. So New York workers on these projects that receive the tax incentive get paid area standard wages. They can support themselves, support their families. That's just one piece of it though. The affordable housing piece is what has kept it from being renewed, being extended, or coming up with a new form of subsidy for this to create the affordable housing. Because 421A being an 80% market rate, 20% affordable split, that used to be a major thing for New York City development. Getting 20% of affordable housing was a very big deal only a few short years ago. Now, that's not how development's done. That's not the real estate industry. That's not tenants. That's not advocacy. That's not where we're at for development now. We as renters, we as tenants have much more power in the face of real estate. So up here in Albany, 421A will not be renewed, will not be extended, because the Assembly, the Senate, they're not happy with the affordability mechanism that 421A brings. They're not happy with the AMIs that it targets. They don't feel it's fair to call it an affordable housing subsidy if we're not getting truly affordable housing, and if we're not getting affordable housing in perpetuity, meaning that this affordable housing remains forever, not just for a certain period of time, not without the proper protections in place. And that's all of the conversation happening right now that has led to session adjourning next week, most likely without this subsidy being renewed or a conversation around another one being put in its place. I see Rita's hand. Rita, I'll take your question.
In the original 421A, though it was 20% of affordable housing, did it have to be built on the site where the 80% was, or it could be built someplace else?
Good
Both.
point, Rita.
Both, because if a project also qualified for MIH, former Mayor de Blasio's mandatory inclusionary housing, and received 421A, MIH, like you're alluding to, Rita, gave them, I apologize for the background music, I'm outside the cafe, gave them the ability to go and do off-site affordable units. It wouldn't have to remain. So before MIH and ZQA with Mayor de Blasio's housing plan, 421A affordable and market rate housing had to be in the same exact building. MIH changed that, and it gave people more flexibility where you can still get your tax incentive from the state and potentially put your housing offsite if you'd like to. So that did change it. So it's a both situation.
It was not just offsite, it could even be in another borough.
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe, no, not another borough. It had to be within a certain jurisdictional area. So for example, you couldn't take our housing from here and suddenly you're out in Queens using those. It was within a certain area that it had to be used, but it would be outside the community board district. So for example, it wouldn't be in community board 8, they would do that housing up in East Harlem. That's what we would see happening here, very much so.
We had one like that though.
No, it finally, as far as I remember, it finally became that. But prior to that, the MIH said build it any place. MIH said it had to be within a square mile of the development, but it didn't have to be on site. So that was the whole thing. Is I can remember that we had a developer come and their spiel, and it was a 421A, and it was going to be 80/20. And we said, where are you building your affordable housing? And the developer wasn't ashamed to say, I don't know.
Right.
Remember?
I remember that meeting over at Hunter. We were at Hunter College.
Absolutely.
Remember? I remember that meeting. Right. He didn't have a clue where it was. It was in the Bronx.
Right.
Bronx.
I don't know.
1635, something funny. I remember the address, 1635, something in the Bronx. Right. You didn't have a clue. He had those certificates. That was back when they had those certificates that everybody was after, because you could use those to build anywhere. That was the other program they had.
That's my next question, and I don't mean to, is these certificates, Rebecca, are they still valid? If they have a valid date on it, until when can they use these certificates? How many certificates are out there? You know, are we going to get out of this morale?
So those are two separate issues. So those certificates do not come from 421A. So I don't have those answers, unfortunately. Those certificates are from city housing development. The city gives those out through HPD. 421A is simply the tax incentive that developers can apply for to get our tax dollars to incentivize their development. So they don't have to go out and gather up their private funding. So I'm not sure how many certificates are out there. I would assume the certificates, if they've been filed and went through the process, MIH and all of these programs are still happening. So I would assume those certificates are still legally able to be used. But I don't know that statute off the top of my head.
Thank you.
I don't think there are many left, from what I understand. I don't think there are many of those left.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Rebecca, are there going to be anything housing related coming out of Albany? Or is it just grim, bad news? Nothing, no anything.
So there's technically a week left, which is an eternity in Albany. It seems like nothing, but it's truly an eternity up here. So as of right now, there won't be any housing this time next week. That could absolutely change. There are conversations around office conversions. People are not returning to work. Midtown is empty. Let's convert that to housing, putting money on the table to incentivize developers to do that, because my understanding from the construction side is taking some of these spaces and breaking them up into individual units, the plumbing, the electricity, all of that, from an office to the individual spaces. that's something that's very difficult and expensive to do. So the state's looking at how they incentivize it. There is legislation from Senator Brian Kavanaugh, who represents Midtown East, but there's not a breadth of support for it. So it's all about the willingness from the leaders. Does the governor want it? Does Andrew Stewart Cousins want it? Does Carl Peasky want it? That will dictate more. There's also conversations around what's called good cause eviction. It's very divisive in both chambers. You have, Democrats, it's a big tent party. So you have people that are very pro-tenant, want to move on good cause. You have people that are a little bit more conservative, a little bit more friendly to real estate and the landlords, and they're hesitant to do that. Yesterday, the Good Cause Eviction Coalition, Housing Justice for All, took over Assembly chambers and threw papers down on them. It caused quite a stir up here in the Capitol. They don't like that kind of activity in the Capitol, as you could definitely guess, in government chambers. But that bill is being debated. I don't know if it will get there over the finish line. There's a lot of opposition and support on all sides of it, like I said. Rental vouchers and assistance. That was actually the only thing, low-income rental vouchers, that got accomplished through the budget for housing. So talking about more of that. There's also a great targeted community hiring program to link up development in New York City to putting New Yorkers directly to work in a much different way than we do now, where it's not just short-term minimum wage jobs, but linking them up to unionized careers in construction. That's a part of the housing agenda. But again, have to see if that makes it over the finish line. So there's a lot up in the air. And a week, I know it feels like nothing, but it is an eternity up here in Albany. I see Sahar's hand. Sahar, what's your question?
Yeah, Sahar.
Yeah, hi guys. This is very interesting. I'm learning so much over here. Great meeting. Just wanted to understand, you just mentioned low income rental vouchers. What exactly is that? I'm going to ask like a layperson about these technical jargon things. What exactly is that? What does that mean?
It's not something I worked on, so I don't have all the details. I won't pretend. I know there's a rep here from Assemblymember Seawright's office, so I don't know if Harley, you have more information on that side to share. Yeah. But my understanding is that they added money to offer more tenants to get rental voucher assistance. So if you are under financial stress and can't pay your rent, and you're at a certain financial threshold for at or below the federal poverty line and a little bit above that, the Senate and Assembly, with the governor's support, put forth money so there could be more rental vouchers and make sure the program functions and serves more people. But I didn't work on it. It's not something that falls within my bucket for the construction union. So I don't have like nitty gritty details. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Harley, do you have details on this?
No, I don't have anything more to add than what I'd be happy to look into it further and let you all know if there's anything additional.
No, this is fine. I understand that probably vouchers just to kind of break even for those renters that can't, right? So it's something on those lines. And the resources from the state level, like they receive these vouchers, like they apply for it and they get it from the state, right?
Yep. You apply to the state and you're given out through the state. Department of Homes and Community Renewal, for example, will give them out in other housing advocacy groups. Housing agencies.
That's really good that all of this stuff is available to make it more affordable. Yeah, that's it.
And the good cause eviction bill, while it seems like it's all about eviction along those lines, Sahar, it also has like a rent cap in place for market rate housing. A lot of us in the neighborhood, my building, for example, I live on 92nd Street. A lot of my neighbors are moving out because the landlord's jacking up rents. And there's no real rhyme or reason. My rent went up $25. My neighbor's rent went up $500. What's that? Where's the commonality here? What's going on? And the good cause eviction legislation that's being debated now would put some rental caps in place to be sure that there can't be price gouging. There's still respect for the private market. That's the reality of housing for us, but making sure there's more balance for tenants. So we're not seeing things like that, because it truly doesn't make sense why my rent went up $25 and my neighbors went up exorbitantly.
And I'm assuming that what the example you're giving of yourself and your neighbor, it's not these separate owners, two separate owners increasing their rent according.
Nope.
It's the building that's increasing.
I live in the front unit. Yeah, I live in the front unit facing the street, and there's a unit right behind me facing the backyard in a little walkout.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. We really need these rules then.
Yeah, and making sure that, you know, when you go to court, for example, you have support as the tenant. The city has done right to counsel, which is really great. We're in your presentation last week about expanding state right to counsel to make sure statewide tenants would have that support when they go to housing court if they're in eviction proceedings, because there's so many times where someone may not have acted properly, someone may not have had all the right tools in their toolkit, but if they went in with a lawyer, things could have been different for them with their housing reality, and they wouldn't have to be on the street.
Right. And okay, I had one just more question, but it's not really kind of, I think, directly related, but how long does a person pass before the eviction happens? Like, you know, for them to go to the court and kind of stop the proceeding from happening? How long is there a time frame?
There is. I don't know it off the top of my head. It's not something I've worked on. Yeah, that's not my side of like the housing and development industry. Sorry.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for.
Any other questions?
I think we have Kathleen Steed. Kathleen? Hi, can we unmute? Hello.
This was just today, as I was going through my local giveaway paper, I see a lot of these, and it's affordable housing for rent, a studio for $2,600 and $851, bedroom $3,013, and a two-bedroom only $3,535. Now, why are these called affordable housing for rent? I mean, it's, you have to make $97,749. How is that affordable for those of us who aren't in that bracket? I mean, everyone I see on this is just incredulous. So my question is, how do they label this affordable housing?
So affordable housing targets are set by the federal government, which is this issue that we always come up again. AMIs, area median incomes, that affordable housing targets can go north of 100% of the local area median income. And we get swept in with Westchester and Long Island. So it's not just our community board districts. It's not just Manhattan, it's not just the boroughs. And that's not something that we can effectuate change on at this level, even at the state level, unfortunately. And when you see affordable housing, quote unquote, that's called affordable and it's $3,000 a month, that's when you're getting around 120% of the area median income. And for me, in my perspective, in my opinion, as a community member, if you're making six figures, yes, it's New York City. Yes, it's very expensive, but affordable housing should be more for someone making much less, should be for someone that's still struggling to get on their feet, should be for someone that isn't, say, making $97,000 a year. You know, I want everyone to live everywhere, but it shouldn't be that we get affordable housing built at that upper income level because we are the Upper East Side, and that's what happens, unfortunately. And that's why we see higher numbers and higher rents when we're not getting, say, 30% of the area median income threshold, which would be for families, say, making $30,000 a year. So there are many levels to it. And on top of all of this is, unfortunately, racism and segregation and how housing development is done. And when you see things like our neighborhood, what affordable housing we get, other neighborhoods, what affordable housing they get, shelters, where they are, where they aren't. So there's so many conflating issues that come into play for housing development and affordable housing, unfortunately.
Who determined the us Upper East Side, and you said Long Island and a couple of other places? Who determines what criteria or what area they choose to decide?
HUD.
Congress,
HUD.
the area
HUD.
median income. Yeah.
HUD does that, Housing and Urban Development.
Okay, I'm
And if
learning.
anything wanted to be changed, it would have to go through Congress to do a change on that front.
Well, I think you just answered my question. Thank you.
Unfortunately, yes, right now, yeah, unfortunately. Rita?
I have a whole stack of affordable housing in Brooklyn where the AMI is 100% and lower. And it goes down to even 30%. If we did just 100% and we did that in Manhattan, it is the developers who are saying, oh, let's get 125%, let's get 135%. And then it becomes affordable for who? And nobody stops it. Hopefully, we can stop it. It's not for the lack of trying, but only in Brooklyn, it can't be 100% AMI and lower, so that we keep all the poor people in Brooklyn and we don't let them out. You know, it's as stupid as that. I would like to say something smart. It's just people will get what the traffic will bear, and they hear New York City, and they right away there are dollar signs all over. But you know, we have people in every breakout of the recent community board applicants that had in different scenarios. The number one consistently, and I think there were 18 groups or 20 groups. Number one was affordable housing. So why are we all yelling for affordable housing in Manhattan and we're not getting it? Something is wrong. I've been
Harley,
a long time. Go ahead. I'm done.
no, I was gonna say, Harley, any thoughts on that from the, not to put you on the spot. Sorry.
No, nothing significant to add right now.
Yeah. Rita? Where's your hand?
Yeah.
Up again? Yes?
No.
No. I
There's room there. You know, if you want to be creative, Mitchell Lama proved we had 100,000 affordable houses in Manhattan, and Manhattan survived even better than it did before. So let's try and let's find a route. Of course, I've been finding that route for about 20 years, but we can get closer. Thank you. I
thanks for that.
don't want to be negative.
Becca, I don't really have much to add to that. I wish I did.
Are there any additional questions?
Thoughts? No? Very kind of a sleepy housing committee meeting for January. Must have been the 80-degree weather today. Everybody's feeling a little.
Oh, it's cold down there. It's 92 degrees in Albany right now. Oh, I see questions.
Oh, all right. Hi,
Schwartz.
Amy. Amy Schwartz. Yes, there we go.
Okay, unmute myself.
Thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you guys. This was very informative. I'm with the Fourth Freedom Democratic Club, and I help with the housing committee. We just set up a working group, rather. So I wanted to chime in and see how you guys are doing. Rebecca, thank you for the overview. I know it was brief, but there's a lot going on. And we look forward to working with you all as the session ends and starting again.
Thanks, Amy.
Well, thank you.
And this is just one piece of housing development. A majority of our land use is controlled by the city council, our city council representative. So Rita, when you talk about wanting to see more affordable housing, it's about empowering our local electeds to know what we want. And we do so much of that here. And I know at times it can get frustrating when it's like, how many times are we going to say the same thing to the same people and not experience that change? So I share that frustration. I do.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Any? No? I wish. Sorry, we don't have a more robust. Hi, Rita. Can we unmute Rita?
If there are no more questions, can I make a motion to adjourn?
You can. Does anybody want to second that? Here we go. We have a
See a
second.
second from
All right,
Sahar.
all right. There we go. All right. Thanks, Rita. I don't know when our next meeting is. I'm sure not for a couple of months, I don't think.
Thank
Anyway.
We'll meet, I think our next one falls during the August recess. So we'll check in and we'll set up a time, because by then we'll have more updates on what the state did. Also the city budget right now is in process. They're going to do monies for housing and seeing what their priorities are. Mayor Adams has a plan. Adrian Adams, the Speaker of the Council, has a plan. They're similar, but slightly different. So the next time we get together, we'll have some more stuff to sink our teeth into, seeing where multiple government bodies have ended up.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Have a great night.